Now, is it just me, or does the WWE have some really serious women wrestling problems? Now, the report came out just last week that the women's wrestling locker room were actually very upset with the direction they had been given within the WWE roster and creative team, and I have to feel like I do agree with them. I think that they are completely underused. Now, Triple H's reign hasn't exactly been perfect all the way around. I've complained about its long-term plan and being so set in stone that it's kind of predictable when things are going to happen, and not every little middle pack story needs that long drive, because it ends up just kind of diluting and making things not worthy until SummerSlam or WrestleMania. Now, the women have an even more right to complain. Now that they've just added in the mid-card belts of being the Intercontinental and US Women's Championship, you would think that the women would get more time. Now, slowly they are definitely getting that more middle pack on TV. Just yesterday on Raw, Lyra Valkyria fought Dakota Kai in a really good match and retained the title, and Ivy Nile came in to hit her to set up a match in the future, of course, when Chad Gable comes back, making that sort of team win all the belts. Now, I think this is a good direction to go into these sort of stories, and these women that aren't quite at that top level right yet should be getting the mid-card belts like the men, and they should be getting significant time. Now, the problem is you're going to have big matches nearly all the time to get that belt up to the level you want, or at least put them on pay-per-view, which I feel like is quite unlikely. Now, you might get the here and there every few pay-per-views, the B-card pay-per-views, you might get a women's mid-card belt on there, but ultimately, even before this match, Lyra Valkyria has barely been booked with the actual belt itself, and it's not even like it's important. It just kind of feels like she is having matches where she gets better and better, and that's kind of just like a side piece to it, which can be definitely delved a bit better. It's just new days with these belts, so I'm willing to give them time, but I do want to see a little bit more. And even in the Royal Rumble, it just felt like Chelsea Green was built and sold a lot better than Lyra Valkyria, even though Chelsea Green is kind of the comedic character in that sense. But I do like the Chelsea Green story on SmackDown, and I think her and Piper Niven will actually have a good match at WrestleMania, which works. So there has been a good story that has developed from this. But the big issue isn't really on the mid-card belts just yet, it's about the main card belts. Before these mid-card belts came in, the only time women got any matches on pay-per-views was basically because of them World Championship matches. You know, it's been a thing before, but Triple H having 4 or 5 matches at each pay-per-view means a lot of people are going to go on each card. And for the women, which there is quite a lot in the main roster right now, they don't even get an opportunity to really show themselves unless they're in these title matches and these rivalries that have been elongated way too long. Now, the Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan one is a complete great example. 2 of the greatest women in the wrestling company right now, 2 of the most over people. They've got their own fan bases, people love watching them, and it just kind of felt that whole rivalry went on way too long because WWE didn't want to move on. You know, Rhea got injured, and I don't think that was obviously supposed to happen, and Liv got the belt, but then Liv, the whole time she was champion, all they could speak about was Rhea Ripley. You know, she took Dom away from him. Obviously it's a big story arc and the Judgment Day, but for months and months and months, even when Rhea wasn't there, Liv was just talking about her in promos. They were worried about Rhea, and then even when Liv Morgan had matches at pay-per-views or on Raw, it never really felt like it was meant to. They just had a quick discussion with someone maybe a week before, and then they would have a rivalry. It wasn't built up very well, and then eventually they kind of just gave up on Liv Morgan, it felt like, and when Rhea was ready, they gave Rhea the belt back, and even now I don't really know what is going on with that belt. She had some sort of rivalry yet again with Liv Morgan where she got in their match and hit Liv Morgan, so she got disqualified and qualified for the chamber, but then Io Sky got upset with her, which does set up quite likely a good WrestleMania match, but it just doesn't feel like they trust a lot of these women who deserve it. Io Sky is now fighting Rhea Ripley on the Raw after Elimination Chamber, which in my opinion is a complete opportunity wasted. Now, I understand that the Elimination Chamber, whoever wins that will fight Rhea, so you don't really want Io just getting into it, but they have their own rivalry that you've built up now for a few weeks. They've been looking at each other for a couple of months now, and that just makes a lot of sense for that rivalry that we haven't seen before, and they're both brilliant wrestlers. And considering this has been the main women's belt, I'd say, on WWE for the last year or so, the WrestleMania sort of plan for it doesn't really make too much sense. I personally think Bianca Belair will win the Elimination Chamber after losing the tag belts on Raw, which means that she is going to fight Rhea Ripley, which is absolutely fair. It's a great match, a dream match we all want to see. But where has that build been for that? A few years ago, they looked at each other a little bit, especially when Rhea won the Royal Rumble, but nothing had really happened since, and you're just going to let someone without any story win the Elimination Chamber and fight Rhea at WrestleMania. Now, I'd love there to be a triple threat with Io Sky, but I just don't think that's going to happen. And unlike the men's who all have their own rivalries, I mean, you even look at the Elimination Chamber coming up, they all have their own little rivalries. You've got Logan Paul and CM Punk not liking each other, you've got Damian Priest and Drew potentially having a rivalry there, you've obviously got John Cena and all the rivalries that he's got within that. And the women, it just kind of sees that they've plopped all the best women they could find into a match and said good luck, which doesn't really make too much sense. And even some of the story arcs, I think most importantly, that have gone on too long aren't really that impressive. For Tiffany Stratton and Nia Jax, I mean, I weren't really into it personally, but they elongated that so long of, is she going to cash in on her, is she her friend? And then eventually she did and won, and then she still had to fight Nia like twice with the belt just to prove she was the champion, for Charlotte to win the Royal Rumble and then want to fight her. Now, if you want Charlotte to win the Royal Rumble and come back, I guess this is something that's going to happen, but if Tiffany loses that belt at WrestleMania, that's an absolute opportunity wasted. You are not elevating anyone, giving them the belt, and not great rivalries. We're not allowed to see them really do great things. They should be the main events of some pay-per-views, or even the openings of these big pay-per-views, to get people interested. And there needs to be more of the women that don't like each other, more of like a community thing than necessarily just one-on-one rivalries. You see it with the men, they all hate each other, even the faces and the heels, and I think the women would benefit heavily from that, especially some women that deserve an opportunity that haven't been fighting. And the tag belts, why are they still a thing? It just feels like they don't know what to do with them. It's now been given back to Liv Morgan and Raquel after they won on Raw, which we've had it a couple of times now, and it just doesn't really make any sense for that. That's just kind of a match to have at WrestleMania. It's the only time you ever see the belt every year, which I think is pointless. And there are so many women on the card right now that they almost need to be equaling the men on cards, I think, or at least getting maybe 2 matches on a 5-match card to actually really compete because of the amount there is. You know, right now the progression from the NXT to the main roster, unless you're a couple of stars like Tiffany and even Roxanne, which they've fumbled with of will they bring her up or not, but it looks like they might do that now, there's not a lot of women that really get a chance. Like Blair Davenport got called up to the main roster way too early. It was early, she'd barely even wrestled back from her injury in NXT, and then they released her because they never gave her an opportunity or never really tried her, which yeah, she might have not been the best, but you know, you've got to give these people a go. Why call them up if you're not going to do that? I just don't really get it. But ultimately the worst thing is that the wrestlers of the women are actually very good right now, and people like Bayley, people like Roxanne, if they have a rivalry for not a belt and you build that, and they've already built a little bit on NXT, that is cool. I think you can do that at WrestleMania, and if it's a good match, people will care. You know, they sometimes need to just have a little bit more trust in them, I think, overall, and stop putting them in these factions and all together. Just a lot of them make them do their own thing. Don't call up a person as a main roster fight in a main card title match at just a normal pay-per-view because you don't care and it doesn't have any real meaning, because no one thinks they're going to win. You know, Piper Niven having a match at Clash of the Castle in Scotland, her home country, is sick, but no one just expected her to win, so it's kind of pointless in the long run. It's the same with when they call up people like Zelina Vega, Zoe Stark, even Shayna Baszler. These sort of people aren't going to win anymore, and they've not really been given many opportunities, and sometimes, okay, they don't deserve it, they haven't taken them, but I do think that they need to be trusted a lot more and given more matches. And I can understand why a lot of them are frustrated, because they're doing nothing most of the time. They even have matches on Raw and stuff, and it just doesn't mean anything. I guess it's a good showing if you can wrestle, but give them more promos, give them more time on the mic. That's where you really get to see a wrestler build a story and really build a brand. You know, Rhea Ripley became incredibly much more over when she joined the Judgment Day, and they were allowing her to speak. Edge gave her the mic a lot, and then everyone thought she was an absolute badass, so she actually got that opportunity in there. You know, Liv Morgan, it's the same thing. We all have maybe liked or disliked her wrestling style, but she is decent on the mic and plays well into her character. Let these people focus on their characters more so we can move into the future. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things going on here, and I do think overall a lot of the belts are quite suffering now in WWE. It isn't just the women, I think the men's are as well, and with Elimination Chamber coming up, they could potentially build some good stories, but I do want to see meaningful stories happen where they're built up for a long time. You know, going into some of the men's matches with the Elimination Chamber and the Royal Rumble, there were so many people that had issues with Gunther and Cody Rhodes, so you could see them kind of going for either one or having a reason to win that belt. With the women's, it just kind of feels like they give whatever they need to the main person at the time. If that's Bianca, if that's Charlotte, they're just going to be given everything that they can, which is fine, but you don't really build them up enough, in my opinion, to really make it a proper story, and that is something I think they need to focus on in the future. And of course, we are missing some big talents right now. Charlotte wasn't here for an entire year. You know, Becky Lynch is still not back. Alexa's only come back after 2 years. Jade Cargill is obviously out injured or worked because she needs to train more, and obviously when these people come back, it will be a lot of bigger talent. talent, but you still have talents there you can use. You know, Liv Morgan was sitting there for ages and then finally got a moment and kind of proved to everyone. Overall, let me know in the comments what you guys think about the women's division right now. I do think it can be improved on heavily, and I do think it's something Triple H really needs to address right now. But let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.